many of them talk several. I've heard many of them talk several times and always get more knowledge each time. So, loving the conference. I have a 2-acre cut flower farm in Burlington, Vermont, and decided to do a talk on how to get the stuff from the field into the barn quickly and efficiently, and then crank out your bouquets. So I'm going to do part slideshow and part demo on making bouquets that we sell at grocery stores and at farmers market. That's going to be the focus of the talk. So it's on the finished design product in a bucket for retail. So on this slide, you'll see down in the corner our logo. It says Growers Designers. That's an old logo. Now it's called Farmer Florists. And let me see if I can. Are we going next? No. Next? No. There we go. So some of the slides are common sense types of things that you'll want to think about as you're doing your field plan. Hopefully in the winter before the season, it's even a good idea to walk your fields in the fall and make notes or take pictures on what you've got going on so that you can redo the things that work best and skip over or change up the things that created tangles or bottlenecks for your operation. This is simply shorter crops at the top of the bed, taller crops at the back of the bed. This is a picture of a pincushion blue cockade, and it's got perimeter twine, not netting. It's a hassle to pick through netting on many types of flowers, but not all. That's a place where you get tangled up if you have netting and you've got to sort through those squares. So this is perimeter support, and we do create that field map with bed numbers in the winter so that we can simply say, oh, grab the marigolds in bed 5 west, you know, because there might be other marigolds in bed 7 east. So we have a map on the wall of what the flowers are, what bed they're in, and whether that's an east-west orientation. Our beds are 3 feet wide. That allows for easy access from either side to pick into the center. And our paths are 2 feet wide. That's mostly due to the tractor wheels on center, which I'll mention upcoming. Oh, and on that back slide, the flags are there. The red flags are there. I use those a lot to remind myself of something I was thinking of as I was cruising by. It's so easy to think you're going to remember every little thing, but I have those red flags in our harvest cards so I can just pop them in and later on recall what it was I was thinking of. In this case, the pincushion had an incredible germination rate, so we had way more pincushions than we had allotted space for, and I'm guilty of not loving to put seedlings in the compost pile. I do try to give a lot of them away, but often I plant everything. So we had way too many pincushions blooming all at once, so I cut down half the crop in the front, and it came up and bloomed a second time when the pincushions behind it were already flagging, you know, gone by. So that was a way that we got a double harvest out of one crop. This is an older slide. What we do now is just sow half as many pincushion seeds so that we have the fresh crop once, harvest that crop maybe 2 or 3 times, then turn it under, and then move on to harvest our second sowing of tender annuals like pincushions. If anybody has any questions while I'm talking, thank you. We cut them to about 6 inches or 8 inches, not all the way to the ground, just like a hard pinch. Well, these would have gone out in the field after Memorial Day, because the last frost in Vermont is generally the end of May. So these would have gone out early June, and the pinch probably would have happened the third week of June. Okay. I'm not a seasoned presenter like all these other illustrious folks, so here we go. Okay, same concept, shortest crop at the top. You can move easily in these 2-foot wide beds without stepping on side shoots and creating debris that then gets bruised and stepped on. These are Nanus glads, mini glads, also with perimeter support, not netting, and we do a lot of successions of these. The glads are on the left, those are green zinnias on the right. So this is an oversimplified version of the field map I was describing, and I even put the compass points in because we're always east-west end of the bed. So I like to have the crew get used to thinking of the bed numbers and directions that way. This is a little misleading, but it was a quick graphic for the presentation. Ageratum isn't spelled agerutum. And sunflowers, we do those as one complete bed because the types that we grow are a cut once crop. So we'll do the entire bed of suns, go through and do our cuttings, and then turn that bed under, or we'll sow a harvestable cover crop underneath those sunflower stumps. Something like oats or a grain, or even field peas you can cut the foliage of, so you can do a grain legume combination under a spent crop and harvest greens off of it. You could also undersow another quick tender annual crop, a celosia or a bouquet delphinium, or the Amazon dianthus are all succession summer crops that have a short time to maturation. So here's a slide of the 3-foot wide bed, the 2-foot wide paths. Excuse me. Our tractor wheelbase is 60-inch on center, so that determines the width of our beds and paths. And to create these beds, I usually use a tiller just set at about 1 or 2 inches. I don't want to till and turn and break up a lot of soil, so we disc or double disc a cover crop in. We let that decay for a while, and then we'll do a very light till to create the bed. I have used a bed former as well, but it created like a very severe cliff between the path and the bed. And those, I believe, are better used with a mulch layer, a plastic mulch layer. So we just go with the tiller, and then we soak our seedlings in a combination of root shield and fish emulsion. We soak the whole tray like a drench before planting them out, so they get a boost of fertilizer and root zone inoculant. And then they also get watered in. We're on very sandy soil. So this is probably being hand watered in because it wasn't going to rain anytime in the near future, and we want to be sure that they had good soil contact, and we didn't want to rely just on the irrigation to make that happen with young transplants. Okay, so we use really clean and sharp tools, and pardon another typo, I noticed the typos. Sharp tools and clean buckets, tools background, that shouldn't say tools background, but it sneaked in there. Sharp tools are important because you want the cleanest cut possible so you don't have mushy stem ends or bruised stem ends where bacteria will grow. We do keep our tools in the same place all the time, and we even label those tools for those hooks. We want to avoid what my dairy farmer neighbor calls double handling, which is putting a tool one place and then having to go find it, and then finally finding it, picking it up and using it, and then putting it down another place. And you do that a lot, and the inefficiencies add up. And also, try not to ever leave a tool laying down on the ground. They get so lost that way, or you step on the end of the shovel handle and the shovel comes up and bonks you in the head. So we bring out a hand tool bucket when we're cultivating, and the bucket even says on it in marker what's in the bucket, so that we can pull out what we need, be sure what's in there when that bucket goes back into the barn for the night. That's way it's easy to see if something is missing. Know what you need to harvest. So we take a few minutes in the beginning of the day to go over all our orders, and we know our exact stem count that we're going to need for making the retail or the farmers market bouquets that day. We're also looking at what we're going to need for the rest of the week for weddings or bulk orders, because when we go out to harvest, we may not just harvest for that day. We want to harvest everything that's ready. So sunflowers, for example, we like to pick those tight when the petals are just coming off the face of the flower. So when they're ready, we pick them, and then we separate out and label in the barn and put things away that are going to be used later in the week. So we have a clear-cut picture of what we're using that day versus later in the week. Okay, so that's just another slide of that concept. Bird's eye view of a harvest cart with flowers in it, and a little bird's eye view simplified example of 3 invoices for the sake of the presentation. So invoice 1, 25 bouquets, invoice 2, 20 bouquets, invoice 3, 15 bouquets. So let's say we're making 60 bouquets to go out to 3 different grocery stores that day. For this presentation, I'm doing a 5-ingredient bouquet, and we set them up in a bouquet line. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. I've seen retail and farmers market bouquets with as few as 3 ingredients or as many as 7 or 8 plus, but I'm focusing on 5 because it works, and it looks nice. It makes it into a true bouquet, but you can play with that number. So we know for this day's order, we're going to have to get 660 stems in because we're doing 11 stem bouquets. So harvesting is like a one-step process. Cut, strip, bunch, and for some people it takes a little time to get used to the ergonomics of that. For some people, handling a lot of flowers in one hand in an even bunch can be a little awkward, but with practice. I always harvest with clippers, but over the years I've gotten carpal tunnel and actually ulnar tunnel, which is like carpal tunnel, but it goes all the way up your arm. So I'd like to learn or practice harvesting with a knife. And I believe there's a video on the ASCFG's website community forum page of Joe Schmidt, a great grower from Wisconsin, Michigan area, who harvests with a knife, and he does like a 5-second demo of creating a bunch, and it's just beautiful. So he can move really smoothly through his beds. It's something worth looking at. So we add to the bunch as we harvest and strip the leaves, and I'll do a demo of that now. And once the bunch is too big for our hand, we stick it under our arm and go like that so we can keep on working with the free hands. And then we stick that under our arm until we're full up, and we grab the whole bunch and walk out of the field. And this, just standing and working with your hands, prevents you from laying anything down on the ground in the path thinking I'll remember to come and get that later. You might remember it the next day when you see it wilted and forgotten, but we don't lay anything down. So I'm gonna, sorry. So there's a couple of us carrying lilacs and tight lilies out of the field. We do harvest all our lilies tight, that was mentioned yesterday. An odd thing about this is I prefer to sell tight lilies, tight suns, tight anything that's going to open after it's cut. But I noticed at our farmer's market there are 6 other flower vendors, and a lot of them will bring things super wide open, so it gets a lot of eye candy appeal, and you see those big flowers, but I kind of cringe when I see that. So our market is changing. There used to be fewer growers and growers that would only bring things tight, and it's changing into a more glam situation. And I do see those bouquets moving. So we've had to actually rethink our farmers market and cut back a little and decide differently what we're bringing, so that we don't bring things home like tight sunflowers and tight lilies. Here we are again with bouquet delphinium. It's belladonna or bellamosa delphiniums. I call them bouquet delphiniums because they're just right for this type of bouquet making. They're not the Pacific giant that are better for wholesaling or wedding work or tall urn work. And tight peonies, once again. At the market, a lot of people do appreciate a tight peony, but I do see a lot of blown open peonies being bought at the farmer's market. So let me do a walkthrough. So I'm just going at this without having looked at the buckets and what's in them, which is fine. And I start with the highest things at one end of the bouquet line. So I'm going to grab some stock. I'm going to go for 11 stems. We'll have some line flowers, some filler flowers, and some focal flowers, 3 types. And I like this because it hasn't been cleaned, so I can actually do the demo as if I'm in the field. So I grab the top of the flower in the field, and doing that helps me find the stem down below, because you can get a feel for which stem you're on when you've got a lot of crowded stems. I'll cut that stem, hang onto my clippers, strip off the lower leaves, and keep doing that over and over again. We do strip our leaves in the field. Some farms don't do that. They'll cut everything, keep the leaves on it, and then move everything into a tent to do the leaf stripping there. I think it's 6 to 1/2 dozen of the other. However, when you harvest dianthus, they can be slow to strip because, I guess I'm used to it, but they can take time. So I know some people will strip certain things in the field and other things in the tent. But if I'm in the field harvesting, I'm just holding onto my clippers, stripping, and then bunching. Now I'm going to bunch these into a bouquet for the sake of timing, but normally, obviously, you'd be harvesting all stock at one time, or all sweet pea at one time, all dianthus, all dahlia, or all poppy. And these lovely poppies, champagne bubbles, Icelandic poppies that Rita Anders brought. Thank you, Rita. She brought all these from her farm in Texas, so I wanted to give her a shout out. So I've got 5 stems so far in here, and you might read some rules about never use 2s or 4s, but rules are meant to be broken. We ignore those. We do use 2s and 4s of certain things. 3s and 5s always work as well. Sweet peas. Now here's the thing. So when I harvest sweet peas. As much as I hate to sacrifice this kind of wonderful tendril and leaf, I will cut them to where I can use them easily in and out of the bucket. Otherwise, you get this kind of thing going on. And that brings me to another point, which is you can either make your bouquets in your bouquet line by pulling stems out of the bucket, like I am, or you can lay down these bunches on the table and work from dry bunches. Get 6 of one, half dozen of the other, just a matter of preference. People do it both ways. So I've got a couple sweet peas, a couple stock, and 3 dianthus, that's 7. And I want to do a couple focal flowers. So again, without putting down my clippers, I'm going to imagine I'm harvesting. So I'm stripping leaves. And normally I wouldn't be harvesting these into the bouquet, but I'll talk about that in a minute. I'm just doing it for the sake of showing you the bouquet line. So that's what happens if, when you're harvesting in the field, you're not cleaning the stems. They get very tangled up in the buckets, and that slows you down. A couple of those, and I just couldn't resist these wonderful Icelandic poppies, which do come out clean because of the shape of the stem. Am I working this mic all right? It feels like it's going in and out. It's okay? All right, good. So, pretty little light, wavy things I try to keep elevated in the bouquet, and then heavier, supportive things like the dianthus are down around the perimeter of the bouquet, and that helps protect the pretty light little wavy things. Once they're at the store or farmer's market and in their package, it sort of creates a cushion for them. So I'll pop that in, and the more you practice, the more you'll be able to simply put a flower once and leave it there. You don't want to find yourself moving the flowers around once they're in place. And you also want to have a light grip on the flowers, and even a low light grip is good. So your hands should be relaxed. If you have to make hundreds of these things and you're choking the flowers, you'll get carpal tunnel. So a light grip, and that also keeps the heat of your hand away from the flowers. Often people will want to bunch like this. They'll find themselves bunching like this, I mean, but if you practice a low light grip at the bottom. And then these have all been cut once in the field, now they're out of water, so as mentioned yesterday, they'll get a second cut at the stem chopper. And I look for what I call the limiting factor, which is the shortest stem. In this case, I think it was the yellow poppy. So I'll cut this to that length. And right in front of the slides, and just come down. I'll rubber band just by putting the band at the base of the group of stems, wrapping around once, and then grabbing that same group of stems again. So I'm not doing the kind of rubber banding which takes longer and tends to choke the stems. I'm not putting this way up here, twisting it, putting it way up there, twisting it, putting it way up there, you know, and then you've got this tight situation. I avoid that method because it does constrict the stems. This is nice and light and easy, and it also leaves the top of the bouquet more open and fluid, so once it's wrapped and in the store, you'll see more of the top of the bouquet. You'll see the face of the bouquet like a plate is how I describe it. I'm going to just keep rolling with this part of the demo since I'm here. So we use cellophane on rolls because we make many different size bouquets, and that's more adaptable. A lot of folks use sleeves, and a lot of folks will use sleeves with their logos pre-printed on them. And that's great if you're doing a lot of consistent size bouquets, like for bigger grocery stores. But we like to allow ourselves the flexibility of the cellophane roll, which I couldn't bring on the plane, but I pre-cut a bunch of these. So this part of the demo will be hard to see, but I just lay the bunch perpendicular to the sleeve, and I lay it so that the tops of the flowers are just peeking over the top of the cellophane, and so that the bottom couple inches of the bunch is below the cellophane.
What do you use to cut your cellophane?
Well, the cellophane, the question is, what do I use to cut the cellophane? And the cellophane is on a roll with a serrated blade, so we just pull it and rip it. Another point, well, let me finish this up. So I just lay that in there, you know, like a little sling, and then I roll from the bottom. I roll from the bottom of the bouquet. I just do a tight pinch down here. I leave this very loose and open because I don't want to choke the bouquet. I want it to have movement. I want people to see everything that's in there. And if the bouquet is too tight, botrytis and other diseases can form in the humidity of all those leaves if there's any moisture. They do get moisture, and then when in the store people pull it out to choose which one they want, and then they put it back in and there's dripping going on. So store bouquets can take a beating as people are searching. Even though they're all the same in a bucket, people will want to pull out the one they like the looks of. And that is why we do this tight roll at the bottom. So I call it pinch and roll for purposes of training. Pinch and roll. And then I do 2 staples there just in case one gives. And that way this is good and tight. So in the store or farmer's market, as people are pulling and lifting, this isn't being compromised. It isn't moving. It isn't being loosened. And then last, we have our sticker labels, which I recommend you count out all the sticker labels you're going to need for your bouquets. That way you don't have to count your bouquets once they're in the bucket or in the cooler. You know you had to make 60, you counted out 60 labels, you went through those 60 labels, you're done. Not seeing it at the moment, but there's a lot of different samples up here that I'll work with if I have time. If not, you can come up and look at them all. Craft paper sleeves are a great farmer's market look. I'll get into that later. But normally, if I could find my stickers, I would put the sticker right up here where the seams meet, and I would leave this pretty fluffy and open. So there's one bouquet. I'll put these in a bucket and I'll make a few more as I'm talking so that at the end you'll see what the display looks like with buckets in a bouquet, even
How much do you sell
heights.
that for at the market?
Okay, yeah, I'll get into that. So that, the question is how much would I sell that for at the market? And for this demonstration, I'm doing 11 stems per bouquet, and there will be some talk soon about the math, doing the math, but this would wholesale to the grocery store for $8, and that gives us an average price per stem of 75 cents. I like to work with averages. Some flowers are worth more than that, some maybe not quite. But that gives us an average. The stores, you'll want to know what their markup is or their margin, and you can have conversations with them about that. You can also do some homework and some scouting and go to stores and see what bouquets they've got what they're selling them for. And you can even lift those bouquets out of the buckets and see how they feel, see how they look. Look at the bottoms of the stems. Are they even? Are there leaves below the water line? Is the packaging attractive, the final product? And so you educate yourself about what the customer is expecting to see, what the customer is used to, what the market will bear. So this would wholesale for $8, and one of our stores would mark it up to $14.99. So it's almost double. If I was selling this at the farmer's market, I would sell it for the same as we sell as the store, so that the customer is used to seeing consistent pricing, whether they're at the store or at the farmer's market. They know this is going to be $14.99, for example. So to net or not to net? Oh, one more point about out in the field. Okay, so another efficiency. We fill our harvest wagon with buckets, and they're empty, and they're cheek to cheek. We walk or drive out, depending on which wagon we're using, to the farthest point of the field where we're going to harvest, starting from way out there. We fill those buckets to just about a quarter with water to avoid wading down and having to haul those carts by hand all the way back, and then having to move those heavy buckets. So just about a quarter full of water is enough. That also keeps the stems from being over moistened and then resulting in that detritus situation. It was also mentioned yesterday, I think, in John Dole's talk. So we get out there with the wagon. We turn the wagon around so it's facing the right way. We put the handle of the wagon up on the wagon so we're not tripping over it as it lays down in the grass. And I know it sounds silly, it's common sense, but little efficiencies that add up. That way you can always just grab that handle and go. You aren't having to find it, pick it up, and go. Little things. It just takes memory, muscle movement to practice. And again, when we're cutting, we know what length we want to cut to for the height of our retail buckets. So even though a snapdragon is this tall in the field, we're only cutting it to where we need it and stripping it so it's ready to go into that bouquet line without needing a whole lot of adjustment. Whoops. To net or not to net. So the slide on the left is, it's a little skinny slide, but it is agrostemma, and it may have been netted, which is a big mistake. Netting is another thing that'll slow you way down if the type of flower that's netted isn't easy to pull right up through that netting. So perimeter twine on something like agrostemma is a better way to go, even though it does get floppy. It's such a short window of harvest that you're cutting it once, you're cutting it twice, then you're turning it under, so you aren't going to have to deal with too much floppiness. Same with like bachelor buttons, certain other crops that tend to get floppy that you only want to cut a couple times and then you're done. The slide on the left shows what was talked about yesterday several times, the planting into the grid of the netting, and then the netting can easily be raised as the plant grows taller. But again, we won't want that netting to be so high that it's interfering with the leaves of the plant. So we want to be able to just cut that lisianthus and pull it out of there without tangles. So we've harvested, now we're going to the barn, either with a little wagon full of flowers or a handful of cart full of flowers. And here's where you get to take a break. You get to pamper yourselves a little. You have some tea or some lemonade, bathroom breaks, personal phone calls. Everyone's happy. They're out of the field. Great time. get ready to move on to bouquet making. So the bouquet line, that's what I call my system. And this slide simply just shows 3 incongruous elements that are not often harvested at the same time, but for the sake of the presentation, Veronica would be the line flower, Lysianthus the focal flower, and believe it or not, tulip, which is a focal flower when it opens. In this example, it's like a filler or foliage because of all that green and how tight those flowers are. So that's just a conceptual slide for lines, focals, and fillers. So when we set up our bouquet line, I had mentioned this already, we'll start from tallest to shortest. We'll have line flowers like these. We'll have focals like these and fillers. So 5 ingredients. We talked about pulling them wet out of the buckets or putting them dry on the bench and working that way. We'll have all our supplies at the end. And for us, those supplies are the stem chopper, and then the rubber band, and then the cellophane roll and the stapler, the double staple, and then last is the sticker at the top, and those go right into the retail buckets with a holding solution, and those buckets are filled to about 1/3 or 1/2, so more than the harvest buckets. And we line those buckets up also in a cart rather than on the floor. And when the cart's full, we can just pull it into the cooler, so less lifting and carrying. All right, so I won't get too far into this for the sake of time, but this is a good way to train yourselves or a crew to do the math. It helps you understand what it costs to make that bouquet. Well, not really. It helps you understand the math about what to price it at. So we've got our 5 types of flowers on the left, and we estimate or make a nice looking bouquet with 11 stems, and that way we know how much of each stem is going into it. This is also called a bouquet recipe rather than formula. We put a value on the wholesale value per stem, and so you see at the bottom the average of those comes out to 75 cents per stem. And then doing the math across and down, you get to $8 value wholesale, which is then $14 retail, either at the market or at the grocery store. I'll do another demo here so that I can get to creating that retail bucket.
Question?
Yes.
If you back that slide, I know you listed flower costs, but I don't see a component in there for your materials. In other words, your sleeves, your stickers, or the labor as to how long you're anticipating or what kind of value you're putting on the labor to assemble that bouquet.
Right. Yep, so the question was about where is the value indicated in the labor to make this, or the supplies, or the rent, or the utilities, the insurance, all that stuff. That would be a big topic. And for this situation, the slide is simply meant to demonstrate getting your head wrapped around creating a formula and valuing those flowers. So to answer your question, those overhead costs or intangibles are buried in.
I'm coming from a difference between selling bunches wholesale versus the added costs of doing a bouquet, the labor and the added materials versus selling bunches of 10 wholesale.
Oh.
Each of those items versus putting them in bouquets.
Oh, I see. The question is about if you're just creating growers' bunches of, say, 10 snapdragons. That would take less time, I'm guessing, because you're just putting 10 snaps in a sleeve, boom. So you wouldn't be maybe getting 75 cents per snap, for example. Maybe your snaps then would be valued at 60 cents each, because this takes a little more time So the wholesale value in this example is higher than wholesale if it was just a grower's bunch. Does that answer your question?
But that's good.
Hi.
Can I address that?
Yes, thank you.
My husband's over here going, punching me. He's been helping me the last 2 weeks making bouquets since we've got so many. He's like, Rita, why don't you straight bunch these things? You get the same amount of money. So your point exactly is right. You get way more money if you just straight bunch it, because you take it 10 stems and slang. We're getting the same money for a bouquet as we are as 10 stems. So why wouldn't you just do 10 stems? And we do. We do a boatload of them in straight stems. But you always have those offs that are just not perfect for straight bunching. So that's what we save and make our bouquets out, because then they're not as much value to us. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So, yeah, you get way more money if you straight bunch. You sell straight bunches, do it.
Thank you, Rita.
Okay.
We don't wholesale straight bunches, so I didn't quite know the answer to that question.
On
Yes?
one of the slides, you indicated that what your 2 stems of foliage. I don't see this. Is that just because of the selection you have here, or would you normally put? I know the sweet pea is slightly that way, but it's pretty light on the foliage side. Is that intentional, or?
No, the question is, the formula examples may have said foliage, focal, and line.
Actually, it said
Filler,
focal, and foliage.
filler, focal, and foliage. So, and there's not a sample, there's not a lot of foliage here in this example, but we're rolling with what was able to be harvested and brought at this time. And there are some foliages back here, but they're being saved for the next presentation, but there is seeded uke or other things that you could use instead of the sweet pea, for example,
Or bells.
or bells. Bells would
We
be-
were just wondering what kind of foliage you might consider. Like, what do you consider foliage? What do you like to use?
Foliage. The question is, what do we like to use for foliage? We like to use basils. We like to use scented geraniums. We like to use baptisia. We like to use unbloomed phlox. We have some phloxes that are great as a cut bloom, but other phloxes that are a little rangy looking once they open. So we cut phlox, perennial phlox tight and use that as a foliage. We use marigolds as foliage. Yep, Dusty Miller. So here are just 3 kind of random off the top of my head sample formulas for 11 stem bouquets. Except formula 3 should only have 1 sea holly, not 2, because that adds up to 12. And a sea holly is a great structural foundation flower for building the bouquet into because of its way it grows. So that's 1 sea holly, not 2. So with the math picture with the unhappy face, I did cover a lot of this already, but this is up here to remind you to do homework by looking at other vendors' bouquets at other farmers markets. We do what I call a reconnaissance tour at our farmers market, where we walk around and see what everyone's selling and at what price. We never want to undercut anybody. We don't want to race to the bottom, and we don't want to dump flowers. So we're sure that our display looks top-notch and our bouquets are easy to see, easy to grab, easy to go with, and that they're at the right price so we can make a livable wage. And I already talked about the bottom point, 75 cents per stem average, an 11 stem bouquet. I'm afraid I might run out of time.
20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay, that's good, that's good. So oh, there's a question?
I was wondering about once you set the topic in
Yep.
Does it matter if you burn it again if you need to burn it again? The bottom?
Oh, that's a good question. So poppies in a bouquet, do I reburn the stem ends? And I don't. I harvest the poppies into hot water, and then I wrap the poppies in a newspaper cone to keep the flowers facing upright. I harvest them when there's just a split of color on the bloom, and I would put the poppy in the bouquet that tight. Generally, I would only use poppies at the farmer's market because that's a one-day event and all those bouquets are going to sell and they're going to be enjoyed that weekend, but by Tuesday that poppy might be sagging. I wouldn't use poppies in a retail store bouquet, which might be sitting there for 3 days before someone buys it. Am I here? Yeah, okay. So we also give our farmers market bouquets cute names like Juicy Fruit, and depending on what the bouquet looks like, as people enjoy that fun factor. So the next 3 slides are just bird's eye views of some of those retail bouquets. And on this one, Amarnath, typo. The zinnias in this bouquet we harvest when the center ring of petals is unfurled. So we don't wait until the zinnia head is completely open and the center is starting to pollinate. For us, that's gone too far. There's a question?
I'm just curious, I guess you're probably heading that way, but what is elderberry net?
Oh, yeah, I'll talk about the ingredients real quick. So that's the zinnia, the stage of harvest. The pincushion, we call them pincushion instead of scabiosa because scabiosa just sounds pincushion is so much nicer. The amaranth is the green tassel. The verbena is Verbena bonariensis. And elderberry net, so after we have a lot of perennials and a lot of shrubs, half our 1/4 shrubs, 1/4 perennials, 1/2 annuals. So the elderberry net, it may be hard to see in this slide, pardon the quality of the slides, but once the elderberries have come off the plant, once the birds have eaten them all or you shake them all off, then you have this cool red purple net thing that's a real interesting botanical. I call them botanicals. It's a great word if you're talking with brides for weddings about texture and variety and botanicals. That's a botanical. For this presentation, I guess it would just be called a filler. So mustard and mauve, fun names. This one has sunflowers in it, again harvested tight when the petals are just coming off the face of the flower. Solidago, which I like to call G-Rod, because G-Rod sounds like fun, and there's so many Solidagos, so G-Rod, it's everywhere. Tansy, harvest young. Once it gets older, it smells like Foot Lockers. So, young tansy. Hydrangea. We often, we'll pick hydrangea into hydrating solution, and so it takes up as much water as possible, and we'll even go so far as to, this is especially for a wedding, if you're going to have hydrangeas on an arch or something and they're out in the sun and the wind, we'll soak those hydrangeas, we'll soak the whole thing in a bathtub to super hydrate it. Then, once you've shaken off that excess water and let it air dry a little bit, you can spray it with, get this, a combination of Pledge floor wax and water, and it seals the moisture in. It's the same kind of product as Crowning Glory or the other floral sealers, but you can get away with using Lemon Pledge floor wax and water. Pledge?
What kind of ratio is that?
Oh, it's just like a tablespoon to a quart,
Okay.
you know, a light ratio. Yeah. A sprayer and away you go. Great for corsages and boutonnieres too.
And if you smell it.
And then sedum, We grow lots of sedums. Again, someone asked what a foliage or filler would be. Sedum in all stages of growth. And this is the last sample slide. I only have a few more slides to go, and then maybe I'll jam through a couple bouquets. Marigolds, again, from bed 5 East, for example, what I mentioned earlier. Zinnias, again, with the center row of petals unfurled. Young tansy, Ammi majus or Ammi daucus, lots of Ammis. And then Dianthus, probably in this case an Amazon type, which we do successions of throughout the season. We treat those as tender annuals. All right, so wrap and roll. So the end goal is for customer-friendly grab-and-go bouquets. You'll notice in the supermarket, if you get to revisit a supermarket where you've brought flowers to, that by Sunday afternoon things can be looking pretty beat up, and there will be other vendors' flowers in other vendors' buckets, and the prices will all be mixed up, and half of them will be half out of the water. I call those high riders, when a customer pulls something out, looks at it, and then decides they don't want it, and so they'll go like that, and the stems might not be all the way down in the water. Produce departments in grocery stores often don't have time to really tend to the flower display, so if you can check it out a few days after you've been there, it's very educational. I mentioned the counting out sticker labels first, so you aren't bringing 21 bouquets to the store, but only charging for 20. Mentioned briefly options around wrapping, cellophane, and craft paper, and I'll try to get to the last few minutes by just holding up different size sleeves. Craft paper also does come on a roll, and it's a great farmer's market look. It's also a great retail look, but if you want to be careful the craft paper doesn't get down into the water, because then it gets soggy and falls apart. So you can do a wider cellophane sleeve and a shorter craft paper like topping. You start with your sleeve, you put the craft paper at the top, you lay your bouquet in there, then you do the wrap and roll that I described from the bottom. That way this is cellophane, plastic, water ready, and the craft paper is just like some trim up here at the top. I don't know of a company that makes half craft paper, half cellophane. I did call Aru, which is a great supplier of all things floral wrap and presentation. They sent some samples which are up here, and other ASCFG growers on the board also brought samples, and I'm sorry if I don't get time to go through those at great length, but they are up here, and there's some information from Aru on the back table, or it was on the back table, I'm not seeing it, but I had fanned out a bunch of price lists and catalogs, so those may have been moved to another area. They're green.
How do you spell the name?
Just the letter A-R-O-O.
Thank you.
Yep. Well, this is the last slide, so this is good because I'll be able to make bouquets. I call this a presentation about presentation. I talked about the perceived value of the customers and the general public are used to seeing at what price. And what is the fair value? What do you need to get to earn your livable wage? Comparables we talked about, going around to farmers markets and grocery stores and understanding what other people are charging and what their bouquets look like. At our farmers market, there was another vendor who was creating these gorgeous, huge bouquets and selling them for not enough money, in my opinion. And you know, I'm friendly with them all and say hey and say, oh yeah, we have bouquets about that size, but we're gonna roll with, you know, $12 instead of $9. And then I can even say, oh, you know, how'd you do? Yeah, we sold out of ours at $12 price. And through many conversations like that, some of these other vendors have raised the floor, raised the bar so that we're more equal in our bouquet sizing and pricing, so that they aren't working just as hard as we are to sell their $9 bouquets all within the first half hour of the market and not make very much money. That would happen, but then people would come to our booth and buy the $12 bouquets. So it all worked out even in the end, but it is a good thing to keep an eye on. The one bouquet left in the bucket, that was, does that look like the runt, or does it look like you better grab it and go because they've been so hot that everyone's been buying them and, you know, they want to grab the last one? I call it the scarcity theory. So at the farmer's market, if there's the end of the market and there's one left, we often downsize our buckets so that you don't have big buckets with just one, which tends to then turn sideways. We downsize our buckets, and so that last bouquet in the bucket always looks fabulous. In a grocery store, that's harder to do, but you can educate the stores to downsize the buckets as well as they sell out. Question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could address in the stores, how often do you deliver a week, and then what do you do? How do you educate the stores to not leave your flowers when they're looking bad? I mean, how many days do you tell them when you deliver, you need to pull these in so many days? Or?
So the question is, at the grocery store, how many days are our flowers on the floor in the display?
Yeah, and are you know, like how many days do you deliver to them a week?
How many days do we deliver, and how do we educate our customer, the produce department, about how to handle the bouquets? So we deliver on Mondays and Thursdays to 4 grocery stores, and the bouquets we deliver on Monday are sold out by Thursday when we show up. So they're only on the floor Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You know, if someone buys a bouquet on Wednesday, the flowers were harvested on Sunday, so it's already a 4-day-old item, and then they're going to want that to last for about a week. So it is a tricky equation. Our grocery stores, we ask them to pull anything that looks bad, and we show them what a high rider looks like and how it happens, but frankly, they often don't have time to manage their floral display. So there is some shrink, and we've got our levels just right, so there's very limited shrink, so they aren't asking for credit back. Was there another question? Yes?
Probably really stupid question, sorry, but when you're doing bouquets, you also add what happened for like markets?
The question is if we add a packet of Floral Life, and we don't, we just skip it. That's a whole other topic. We have to grow according to certifiable organic standards because we're on rented land, and that's one of the lease conditions. So there is still debate in the organic industry about can you use floral preservative or not. I believe that if you're growing according to the organic standards, and then the floral preservative is saying in a basket at your farmer's market for people to take or not take as they want to, then you're an organic grower and they're doing whatever they're doing after that. But I don't attach floral preservative to store bouquets. I don't know, are any farmers doing that, attaching a preservative to their grocery store bouquets? A couple are. Okay. I haven't seen many do that, but apparently some do. It's not a bad idea. Go ahead. 5 minutes, okay. And another question, go ahead. What kind of scented geranium? Oh dear. I'm the worst at remembering all those. Who grows scented geranium that's tall enough for bouquet work and long lasting? There are some types up here. What type do you grow?
One that I like is
Say it again.
Citronella.
citronella. Any other tall scented geranium? Sorry?
The rose geranium?
Rose geranium, chocolate geranium. I just get the flat at our greenhouse grower near our town and away I go, so I'm sorry I don't remember. Those rose geraniums leaves also hold up well and make great little boutonniere and corsage or halo foliages for wedding work. This last slide has the 5 ingredients, again, sticking with that theme. It has, and these were all grown at the farm, well, except for the eucalyptus. So we do winter production. Tulips, narcissus paperwhite, scented geranium, white pine, and ilex berry. Our 5 ingredients, and these are wrapped in craft paper, so that's another look. I guess I only have a couple more minutes, so go ahead.
What was the drench that you put on the trays before you put them in the pails?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
What was the drench that you used to put on the trays before they went in the pails?
Oh, okay, so our seeding tray, our transplant trays, after they've hardened off, we get a big sled, like a, I don't know what they're called, those flat plastic sleds that you slide down the snow in, and you put in water, root shield, and fish emulsion, or you can use other types of root zone inoculants for microbials to colonize the root zone and help the plant take up nutrients, but we just give them a boost of that upon transplanting. Any other questions? Go ahead.
You've started to do shields sort of proactively, or when you're thinking or having additional transplants?
The question is if we use the root shield proactively, or did we use it retroactively because we were noticing issues with transplants. I just believe it strengthens the microbial activity around that root zone to enhance the uptake of nutrients between the plant root hairs and all the soil microorganisms, that whole nutrient uptake equation. I believe in boosting the microbial and fungal activity of the soil. And that was also mentioned yesterday in Jenny's presentation where she puts leaves, and also in Lisa's presentation, leaves and sawdust chips are a lot around perennial plantings, both for mulching and water retention and for increasing those fungal hyphae and bacterial populations that are the most crucial part about nutrient uptake, more crucial than just adding fertilizer every year. Those are what you need to get the fertilizer in the plant to uptake. How are we doing on time? 1 minute, okay. I didn't know I talked so much. I thought I'd be making more bouquets, but that's how we do it. And I hope it was informative. And I'll put these sleeves back on the back corner table, and feel free to take anything home in case it's something you haven't worked with and you want to practice using it, or you just want to feel for the craft paper versus the cellophane. It's all going to be back there.
Where is your cutter from?
The stem chopper, well, I am lucky enough to live in Burlington, Vermont, where there is a wholesaler, so I just buy the things there. But if I had to have it shipped in, Rita?
But Blocker in Romania, but you get it to wholesale flowers from a wholesaler, they come.
Luckner, Germania, any floral supply. I don't know if Aru even has things like this, but you could probably Google it. We get them from our wholesale supply house.
All
All right, thank you.
We're going to take a 15-minute break, but first we have one more raffle drawing, so if we could just listen up for that.
Yeah.
Still recording that.